Hey there. Welcome to Nocturne Sleep Crime. I'm here to help you relax tonight. I know many of you use this video to fall asleep. So, before you get cozy, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. I'd love to hear from you. Story 1. At 2:17 a.m., the phone rang in the quiet town of Black Hollow. It wasn't loud. It wasn't frantic. Just a steady, patient ring, like it knew someone would eventually answer. Dispatcher Elaine Morris glanced at the clock above her console, sighed, and reached for the receiver. Graveyard shift was usually nothing but drunk arguments and wrong numbers. Black Hollow slept early and deep. It always had. Black Hollow Emergency Services. What's your location? At first, there was only breathing. Slow. Controlled. Too calm. Elaine straightened in her chair. Sir? Ma'am? I need you to speak. The breathing continued, followed by a faint sound, metal scraping against metal. Then a man's voice came through the line. Low. Measured. I think I've made a mistake, he said. Elaine's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Okay. Tell me what happened. A pause. I didn't mean for it to take this long. Her spine tightened. Sir, are you in danger right now? No, the man replied. She is. Elaine's heart rate spiked. She signaled to the supervisor without looking away from the console. Sir, where are you calling from? Another pause. Longer this time. Then, softly, you already know. The line went dead. By 6:45 a.m., the first body was found. It lay behind St. Jude's thrift store, slumped against the brick wall where the alley narrowed into shadow. The woman was barefoot. Her wrists were bound with yellow electrical wire. Her throat had been cut so precisely that the coroner would later describe it as clinical. No ID. No phone. No purse. Just a single object placed neatly on her chest. A disconnected landline handset, its cord sliced clean through. Black Hollow had seen murders before, domestic disputes, bar fights gone wrong, but nothing like this. And this was only the beginning. Black Hollow sat off Highway 16, a town most people passed without noticing. Population just under 11,000. One high school, 2 churches, 3 bars that closed by midnight. People locked their doors more out of habit than fear. Detective Aaron Pike had grown up here. He knew every shortcut, every dead-end road, every family that had been around long enough to have secrets buried beneath new paint and fresh lawns. When he arrived at the crime scene, Pike didn't need to crouch down to know something was wrong. This isn't rage, he muttered. The killer hadn't rushed. There were no defensive wounds. No signs of struggle. Whoever she was, she'd been restrained carefully, almost gently. She was kept alive, the coroner said quietly. For a while. Pike exhaled through his nose. How long? Hours. Maybe more. The handset caught his attention. Why leave that? He asked. The coroner shrugged. Message? Pike didn't like that answer. By noon, rumors were already spreading. Someone had heard screaming near the railroad tracks. Someone else claimed they saw a white van circling town all week. The thrift store closed early. Parents kept their kids home from school. And Elaine Morris sat in the dispatch office, staring at her phone log. She hadn't told anyone yet, not even her supervisor, but she knew. She knew that voice. Not the name, not the face, but the tone, the calm certainty of someone who had already decided how things would end. At 3:09 p.m., the phone rang again. Elaine froze. Same line. Same number, unknown caller. Her mouth went dry as she answered. Black Hollow Emergency Services. I hoped you'd pick up again, the man said. Elaine's hand trembled. Who is this? You didn't ask her that, he replied gently. Elaine swallowed. Where are you? Close, he said. Always close. She motioned wildly to the supervisor, who began tracing the call. Why are you doing this? Elaine asked, buying time. A soft chuckle. Because people only listen when they're afraid. The trace failed. The line dropped. 3 minutes later, a jogger found the second body. This one was a man in his late 30s, discovered inside a disused phone booth on the edge of town. A relic from the 90s everyone had forgotten was still there. His hands were duct-taped behind his back. His head slumped forward, chin resting against his chest. The cause of death wasn't the knife wound in his abdomen. It was asphyxiation. The booth's door had been sealed shut from the outside, and dangling from his neck was a laminated card with a single word printed in bold black ink. Missed call. By the end of the day, Black Hollow was in lockdown. State police arrived. The FBI was notified. News vans lined Main Street like vultures. And Detective Pike stood alone in the evidence room, staring at the two handsets laid side by side. Both had been disconnected before being placed. Both were clean, wiped of prints. Both were older models. Analog. Untraceable. "This guy wants us talking," Pike said aloud. "He wants to be heard." What he didn't say, but felt deep in his gut, was worse. The killer wasn't finished. He was just getting started. At 11:58 p.m., Elaine's phone rang for the third time. She answered without waiting for permission. "Yes," she said. The man breathed on the other end. "You're doing very well," he said. "Most people panic by now." Elaine clenched her jaw. "How many?" A pause. "Depends," he said. "How many times will you answer?" The line clicked off, and somewhere in Black Hollow, another phone began to ring. By morning, Black Hollow no longer felt like a town. It felt like a recording studio where everyone was holding their breath, afraid the slightest sound might trigger something unseen. Police cruisers idled on street corners. Yellow tape cut across familiar sidewalks. The old phone booth, once a joke, then a curiosity, was now guarded by two state troopers who refused to let anyone within 20 feet of it. And inside the Black Hollow Police Department, the phones would not stop ringing. Detective Aaron Pike hadn't slept. He stood in the briefing room with a styrofoam cup of burnt coffee cooling untouched in his hand while the task force argued around him. State police, county detectives, and one quiet man from the FBI who had introduced himself only as Special Agent Daniel Kerr. "We're dealing with a serial offender," Kerr said calmly, hands folded. "Organized, methodical, communicates directly with emergency services." Pike rubbed his eyes. "He's not just communicating, he's directing." Kerr nodded. "Which means escalation." Elaine Morris sat against the wall, pale, arms wrapped tightly around herself. She hadn't gone home. She hadn't even stood up since the third call. Kerr turned to her. "Elaine, I need you to walk me through every word he said." "Exactly." Elaine swallowed. He never raises his voice. He doesn't threaten. He talks like he's already won." That earned her a few uneasy glances. "Anything distinctive?" Kerr asked. "Yes," Elaine said immediately. "He pauses before answering questions. Not because he's thinking, because he wants me to think." Kerr made a note. Pike watched him carefully. "What about background noise?" Pike asked. "Traffic? Music?" Elaine shook her head. "Almost nothing. Just small sounds. Once I heard something metallic. Another time, it sounded like paper being moved. Like files." That caught Kerr's attention. "Files," he repeated. "Interesting." The victims' names were finally released by noon. The woman behind the thrift store was Lydia Grant, 32, a night cleaner at the county courthouse. No criminal record. No known enemies. The man in the phone booth was Marcus Bell, 38, divorced, former telecom technician laid off 2 years earlier. The connection between them, at first glance, was non-existent. Until Pike noticed one detail both shared. They had both filed formal complaints with Black Hollow Emergency Services in the past year. Lydia had complained that her calls reporting a domestic disturbance in her apartment complex had gone unanswered. Marcus had filed 3 complaints about dropped emergency calls while working as a contractor. They both felt ignored, Pike said quietly. Kerr leaned back. "So our killer listens to the unheard." "Or thinks he does," Pike replied. At 2:43 p.m., Elaine's phone rang again. Everyone in the room froze. Pike didn't wait. "Trace it. Record everything." Elaine lifted the receiver, hands shaking. "Black Hollow Emergency Services," she said. "Good afternoon, Elaine." Her breath caught. "How do you know my name?" A soft exhale, almost a sigh of satisfaction. "You say it every time you answer for other people." Pike mouthed stall him. Elaine forced herself to speak. "What do you want?" "To make sure you're listening." The trace lights flickered, then died. Kerr swore under his breath. "Why these people?" Elaine asked. "Why Lydia? Why Marcus?" The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he said, "Do you know how many calls go unanswered every day?" Elaine closed her eyes. "Sometimes lines are busy." "Sometimes," he agreed. Sometimes people die while waiting. Pike stepped closer. You don't know that. A chuckle. Don't I? The line clicked. 30 seconds later, an officer burst into the room. Another one, he said. Found at the old switchyard. The third victim was still alive when they arrived. Barely. He was duct taped to a folding chair inside the abandoned electrical building, a landline phone duct taped to his chest. His lips were blue. His eyes fluttered weakly. Paramedics worked frantically as Pike scanned the room. Wires ran everywhere. Old copper lines hung like veins from the ceiling. On the wall, written in black marker, "You heard this one. The victim survived." His name was Thomas Reed, 56, retired fire dispatcher. When he woke up in the hospital, he cried. "They let it ring," he whispered. I could hear it ringing. Thomas Reed told them everything. The man had come in calmly. Masked. Gloves. No accent. No raised voice. "He told me to sit," Thomas said. "Told me this wasn't punishment. It was education." "What did he say?" Kerr asked. Thomas stared at the wall. He said silence can kill just as easily as a knife. That night, Pike drove home through streets that felt unfamiliar. Porch lights burned long past midnight. Curtains twitched when his headlights passed. Every ringing phone sounded louder than it should. At home, he poured himself a drink he didn't want and stared at the old landline mounted on his kitchen wall. He hadn't used it in years. It rang once. Pike's blood turned to ice. He answered. "Detective Pike," the man said pleasantly. "I was wondering when you'd join us." Pike's jaw tightened. "You broke into my house." "No," the man corrected. "I called." "How did you get this number?" A pause. Then softly, "You stopped listening after your wife died." The line went dead. Pike stood there long after the dial tone returned. At 1:12 a.m., every emergency line in Black Hollow rang at once. Dispatchers scrambled. Operators shouted. Elaine answered one of them. All she heard was static, and beneath it, dozens of voices layered together. Men, women, children, all speaking at once, all saying the same thing. "Can you hear me?" Then silence. When the lines cleared, one final message remained in the system. A recorded voicemail left on the emergency server. Kerr played it for the room. The man's voice was calm. "Steady. This town has learned how to dial," he said. "Now it will learn how to listen." The recording ended with the unmistakable sound of a phone being set gently back into its cradle. Pike looked at Kerr. "He's not killing randomly," Pike said. "He's auditing us." Kerr nodded grimly. "And we're failing." Outside, a phone rang somewhere in Black Hollow. No one answered it. The voicemail broke something inside the department. It wasn't just the message, it was the timing. The way it arrived after every line rang at once, after the layered voices dissolved into silence. As if the killer had reached inside the system itself, rearranged its organs, and left it breathing just enough to survive. Black Hollow emergency services shut down for exactly 12 minutes that night. 12 minutes with number 911 coverage. 12 minutes where the town was on its own. By sunrise, the governor's office was calling. The media was calling. Families of the victims were calling. And the phones, every phone, felt like a threat. Detective Aaron Pike stood at the whiteboard in the briefing room, staring at a growing web of names, dates, and red lines. 3 victims, 1 survivor, all connected not by blood, not by geography, but by sound. Or the lack of it. Special Agent Daniel Kerr tapped the board with a pen. "We need a framework. Something predictive." Pike nodded slowly. "I think we already have one." He wrote 3 words at the top of the board. "Dead air theory." Elaine Morris watched from the doorway, arms crossed tightly around herself. "What does that mean?" Pike turned to her. "Dead air is what dispatchers fear most. Silence where there shouldn't be any. A dropped call. An unanswered ring." Kerr picked up the thread. "Radio silence during emergencies increases mortality rates by up to 40%. It's documented." "And he knows that," Pike said. "He's obsessed with it." Elaine's voice trembled. "So he's killing people because calls went unanswered?" "Not exactly," Kerr said. "He's killing people who represent unanswered calls." They dug deeper. Thomas Reed's testimony cracked something open. As a former dispatcher, Thomas had access to internal archives, old training manuals, decommissioned systems, obsolete protocols. He remembered a term used years ago during system audits. Dead air events. Instances where calls were initiated but never logged. No record. No response. Just silence. It happened more than people think, Thomas whispered from his hospital bed. Especially in the early 2000s. Analog systems. Budget cuts. Bad infrastructure. Kerr leaned in. Were names attached to those reports? Thomas nodded slowly. Not officially. Pike felt his pulse quicken. Unofficially? There was a list, Thomas said. People who filed complaints. People who insisted someone should have answered. How many? Pike asked. Thomas closed his eyes. Dozens. The killer wasn't improvising. He was working from an archive. By mid-afternoon, the FBI had isolated a subset of 27 individuals tied to unresolved emergency call complaints dating back 15 years. Some had moved away. Some had died of natural causes. And some still lived in Black Hollow. Elaine recognized one name immediately. Margaret Klein. She calls all the time, Elaine said quietly. At least once a week. For emergencies? Pike asked. No, Elaine replied. For loneliness. She says her phone gets quiet. The room fell silent. Kerr broke it. Put a unit on her house. Now. Margaret Klein lived alone at the edge of town in a small white bungalow with peeling shutters and a porch that sagged in the middle. The patrol car arrived at 4:12 p.m. Too late. The front door was unlocked. The house smelled faintly of dust and lavender. Margaret sat upright in her armchair, hands folded neatly in her lap. A phone rested on the coffee table in front of her, receiver off the hook. Her eyes were open. The coroner later ruled the cause of death a heart attack, induced by extreme stress. But what froze Pike where he stood was the answering machine. It was still blinking. New message, 1. He pressed play. Margaret's voice filled the room, shaky but determined. Hello. I know someone's there. I just wanted to talk. I don't need police. I don't need an ambulance. I just don't want to be alone tonight. A pause. Then the killer's voice, soft and close. I know, he said. I stayed. Elaine collapsed when she heard it. Pike caught her before she hit the floor. The killer called again that night. This time, he didn't hide it. He dialed into the department's recorded line. The entire task force listened. You're mapping me, he said calmly. That's good. Maps prevent people from getting lost. Pike leaned into the mic. You killed Margaret. A pause. Then, no. I listened to her. You terrified her. Yes, he agreed. Fear focuses the mind. Silence dulls it. Kerr interjected. What do you want? To finish the audit. Elaine found her voice. How many are left? The killer didn't answer immediately. When he did, his tone had changed, just slightly. Too many, he said. But you'll know the last one. The call ended. That night, Pike couldn't sleep. The killer's words echoed in his head. You stopped listening after your wife died. He stood in his kitchen, staring at the landline again. He hadn't unplugged it. He lifted the receiver and held it to his ear. Nothing. Just a low hum. Dead air. At 3:33 a.m., Pike's cell phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered. I'm glad you finally checked, the killer said. Pike's voice was ice. You're enjoying this? No, the man replied. I'm correcting it. Correcting what? The record. Pike closed his eyes. You think this makes it right? I think, the killer said slowly, that ignoring suffering is worse than causing it. You're wrong, Pike snapped. You're a coward hiding behind philosophy. A pause. Then, softly, I used to believe that too. The call ended. The break came from an unexpected place. Elaine hadn't gone home. She sat alone in the dispatch office long after her shift ended, replaying call logs on her screen. She noticed something no one else had. A pattern. Every call the killer made, every single one, occurred during system handoffs. Shift changes. Maintenance windows. Moments when responsibility blurred. He's calling between the lines, she whispered. She brought it to Pike. He's exploiting transition gaps, Pike said. That's how he stays invisible. Kerr nodded. Which means he's done this before. Professionally. Telecom? Pike asked. Or emergency infrastructure, Kerr replied. Pike thought of Marcus Bell, the laid-off technician, and then another name surfaced. Evan Holloway, former county emergency systems auditor. Fired 12 years ago after submitting a report alleging fatal negligence due to underfunding. The report was buried. Holloway sued. He lost. His wife died 6 months later during a delayed ambulance response. Pike felt sick. "Find him," he said. They found Holloway's house abandoned. Utilities disconnected. Walls stripped bare. But in the basement, they found something else. Dozens of old phones. Labeled. Cataloged. Each one tagged with a date and a name. And at the center of the room, a corkboard. Pinned to it was a single photo. Elaine Morris. Underneath, written in careful handwriting. "She still listens." Pike understood then. Elaine wasn't a victim. She was the control. The proof that listening still existed. At dawn, the phones rang again. Only one rang this time. Elaine answered. "Yes," she said, steady despite the fear burning through her. "I'm ready," the killer said. "Are you?" Elaine swallowed. "For what?" "To decide," he replied. "Whether this ends in silence or connection." The line stayed open. Breathing passed between them. No dead air. Not yet. Elaine Morris didn't hang up. That alone changed everything. The line stayed open. No clicks, no static, no dead air. Just two people breathing on opposite ends of a wire that suddenly felt heavier than any weapon. "I'm here," Elaine said. In the observation room, Detective Aaron Pike and Special Agent Daniel Kerr stood frozen, headsets pressed tight, afraid that even a whisper might break whatever fragile balance had formed. The killer exhaled slowly. "Do you know how rare that is?" Elaine's voice was steady, though her hands shook beneath the desk. "People answer phones every day." "Yes," he replied, "but they don't stay." The last operator. The call stretched past 5 minutes. Then 10. Dispatch policy allowed no more than 90 seconds without actionable information. Elaine ignored it all. "You chose this job for a reason," the man said. "Why?" Elaine swallowed. "Because my father died alone." The room went still. "He had a heart condition," she continued. "Collapsed at work. His phone was in his pocket. The call never connected. I wanted to be the voice that did." A pause, longer than any before. "I didn't know that," the man said quietly. "You didn't ask," Elaine replied. For the first time, something cracked in his tone. Not anger. Not menace. Regret. Kerr leaned toward Pike. "He's invested." Pike nodded. "Which means he's vulnerable." "Do you remember your wife?" Elaine asked gently. Pike's head snapped up. Silence filled the line. "You said I stopped listening after she died." Pike said into the mic, "You want to talk about her? Then say her name." The killer hesitated. "Rachel Holloway," he said finally. "She called for help. She waited 13 minutes. The ambulance came at 19. Elaine's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry. So was the county," he replied. "In a letter. The test." The killer's voice firmed. "This is the last evaluation," he said. "One call. One choice." Pike stiffened. "You don't get to decide that." "I already have." A new line lit up on Elaine's console. "Incoming, unknown caller." "Someone else is calling," Elaine said. "Yes," the killer replied. "A real emergency. Right now." Kerr cursed. "We need the address." "You don't," the killer said calmly. "You need to decide." Elaine's heart pounded. "Decide what?" "If you answer them," he said, "you hang up on me. And if I don't, then you become what you claim to fight." The room erupted in motion. Text shouted. Tracers spun uselessly. Pike leaned into Elaine's ear. "It's a bluff." But Elaine wasn't sure. The other line rang again. And again. Elaine closed her eyes. She remembered her father. Margaret Klein. Lydia Grant. Thomas Reed shaking in his hospital bed. She pressed a button. She merged the calls. The room went silent. "What are you doing?" the killer asked sharply. Elaine's voice trembled, but it didn't break. "I'm listening to both." On the new line, a woman sobbed. "Please, my baby isn't breathing." Elaine snapped into motion. "Ma'am, I'm here. I need you to put the phone on speaker." The killer didn't speak. Seconds passed. Then, quietly, "That wasn't an option." "It is now," Elaine said. The collapse. Sirens were dispatched. CPR instructions given. The baby began to cry. The woman screamed with relief. Elaine's knees nearly gave out. On the other line, the killer breathed. A long, shuddering sound. You changed the system, he said. No, Elaine replied. I used it. Silence. Not dead air. Listening silence. At 4:41 a.m., the call traced. Not to a house. Not to a phone. But to a portable emergency relay unit. An old auditor's device, stolen years ago, designed to test system failures. It pinged from the old county emergency building, condemned, scheduled for demolition. Pike grabbed his coat. Let's end this. They found Evan Holloway sitting alone in the dispatch room of the abandoned building. No weapons, no restraints, just a phone resting in its cradle. He looked older than his records suggested. Smaller. I never wanted this, he said as Pike approached. You killed people, Pike replied. I documented failures, Holloway said. The deaths were already there. Kerr snapped cuffs onto him. Holloway didn't resist. Did she pass? He asked softly. The baby? Pike said. Yes. Holloway closed his eyes. Then it worked, he whispered. Aftermath. The case broke national headlines. Infrastructure audits. Funding increases. New protocols. Elaine Morris became a symbol, the operator who stayed on the line. Holloway pled guilty to multiple counts of murder. At sentencing, he requested one thing: to speak. I believed silence was violence, he said to the court. I was wrong. Violence is violence. Listening is the only cure, and I forgot that. Months later, Pike removed the landline from his kitchen wall. Not because he feared it, but because he no longer needed it to remind him to listen. Elaine still works nights. Sometimes the calls are quiet. Sometimes they're chaos. But she answers everyone the same way. I'm here, she says. And she means it. The phone stopped ringing the day after Evan Holloway was taken into custody. Not all at once. Not dramatically. They just quieted, as if Black Hollow itself had exhaled after holding its breath for weeks. Elaine Morris noticed it first. She sat at her console during the early hours of the morning, headset resting lightly against her ears, eyes scanning a board that was suddenly too still. No flashing lights. No overlapping calls. No phantom vibrations in her bones. Just the low electrical hum of a system waiting to be used. For the first time since the killings began, the silence didn't feel dangerous. It felt earned. Detective Aaron Pike spent the following days buried in paperwork and interviews, but the work felt different now. He wasn't chasing a ghost anymore. He was walking through the aftermath, counting what had been broken and what had survived. The press wanted statements. The mayor wanted reassurance. The state wanted explanations. But the families wanted something else. They wanted meaning. Lydia Grant's sister asked Pike a question he couldn't shake. If someone had answered sooner, she said, voice hollow, would Lydia still be alive? Pike didn't lie. I don't know, he replied. The woman nodded slowly. That's what hurts the most. The audit, the official review, came in waves. Engineers tore into the emergency infrastructure with a precision that bordered on surgical. Old copper lines were replaced. Analog backups were scrapped. Transition gaps, those deadly moments between responsibility, were closed with redundancy and oversight. They called it the Holloway Reforms, a name Pike hated. Holloway didn't deserve to be memorialized. The victims did. Elaine made sure of that. She pushed for a quieter name within the department, an internal mantra posted above every dispatch station. No dead air. It wasn't policy. It was a promise. Elaine returned to work officially 3 weeks after the arrest. The first night back, her hands trembled as she logged in. Muscle memory guided her fingers, but her body hadn't forgotten the fear. A call came in at 1:04 a.m. Her breath hitched. She answered. Black Hollow Emergency Services. I'm here. A drunk man had locked himself out of his car. Elaine nearly laughed. After the call ended, she sat back and stared at the blinking console. Normal, she thought. Normal felt unreal. But echoes don't disappear just because the sound has stopped. They linger in corners. In habits. In the way people listen harder after something terrible has happened. Elaine heard it in herself. Every pause between words felt loaded. Every second of silence felt like a question. She began staying on the line longer than necessary. Are you sure you're okay? She'd ask. I can stay if you need me. Supervisors noticed, but they didn't stop her. No one wanted to be the one to say hang up first. Holloway. Evan Holloway never asked for visitors. Not from the press. Not from advocacy groups. Not even from the lawyers who wanted to turn him into a symbol. But one name appeared on his request list. Elaine Morris. When Pike told her, she went pale. "I don't have to," she said. "No," Pike agreed. "You don't." She thought about it all night. The next morning, she went. The interview room smelled like disinfectant and stale coffee. Holloway sat at the table, hands folded, posture rigid. He looked smaller than Elaine remembered from the basement, like the weight of everything had finally settled onto him. He looked up when she entered. "You came," he said. "I'm not here for you," Elaine replied, sitting across from him. "I'm here for myself." Holloway nodded. "That's fair." They sat in silence. Not dead air. Just waiting. "I replay it," Holloway said eventually. "Every call I ever made. Every report I wrote that no one read." Elaine's voice was quiet. "You don't get to turn that into a justification." "I know," he said. "That's why I stopped." She looked at him sharply. "You stopped because you were caught." He didn't argue. "I stopped," he said, "because you answered both lines." Elaine felt a chill crawl up her spine. "You proved me wrong," Holloway continued. "I believed systems couldn't listen. Only people could. And I believed people would always choose themselves." Elaine stood. "People choose wrong all the time." "Yes," Holloway agreed. "But not always." She paused at the door. "You don't get redemption," she said. "But you do get to sit with the silence you created." Holloway closed his eyes. "I hear it," he whispered. "Every night." Elaine left without another word. Pike's ghosts. Aaron Pike finally sold his house. Not because he wanted to leave Black Hollow, but because the kitchen felt haunted by things he'd never said. Rachel's photo came down from the wall. Not because he'd stopped loving her, but because he'd started remembering her voice instead of her absence. He kept one thing, the old landline phone, unplugged. He placed it in a box in the garage, not as a reminder of failure, but of responsibility. Listening wasn't passive. It was an act. One evening, Pike visited the old county emergency building before it was demolished. The windows were boarded up, the walls tagged with graffiti. But inside, the dispatch room was untouched, frozen in time. Dust coated the consoles. Pike stood where Holloway had once sat. He imagined the building alive. Lines lit, voices overlapping. Decisions made in seconds that echoed for years. "Never again," Pike said aloud. The room didn't answer. It didn't need to. The call that almost wasn't. 2 months after the trial, during a thunderstorm that rattled windows and drowned out streetlights, Elaine received a call that reminded her how thin the line still was. A teenage boy, whispering, hiding in a bathroom. "My stepdad's home," he said. "He's drunk." Elaine stayed calm, asked the questions, dispatched officers quietly, but something in the boy's voice caught her. Fear, but also resignation. Like he didn't expect help to arrive. "I'm still here," Elaine said, even after units were en route. "You're doing great." There was a loud crash in the background. The line went silent. Elaine's heart slammed. "Can you hear me?" she said. Nothing. Dead air. She didn't hang up. She stayed, counting breaths, listening to the storm, trusting that silence didn't always mean absence. 30 seconds later, the boy whispered again. "I'm okay," he said. "They're here." Elaine closed her eyes, tears spilling freely. After the call ended, she rested her forehead against the console. The echo faded. Echoes that remain. Black Hollow never became famous for the killings. It became known for what came after. Training programs, national conferences. Dispatchers from across the country visited to study the reforms. But the real change was quieter. People learned to wait on the line, to speak clearly, to listen fully. And Elaine became something the killer never expected. Not a symbol, not a martyr, just a woman who answered phones and stayed. On the anniversary of the last call, Elaine worked the night shift again. At 2:17 a.m., a phone rang. She smiled faintly. "Black Hollow Emergency Services," she said. "I'm here." On the other end, a soft voice replied, "Thank you for picking up." Elaine leaned forward, listening, not for echoes of the past, but for the living present. And for the first time in a long while, the line felt light in her hands. Midnight had a sound in Black Hollow. It wasn't silence, not really. It was the low hum of transformers, the distant hiss of tires on wet asphalt, the occasional bark of a dog that had learned the night was when truths slipped loose. Elaine Morris knew that sound better than anyone. She leaned back in her chair at 12:58 a.m., stretching her fingers, eyes flicking over the console. 3 hours into her shift. Nothing urgent yet, just routine calls. A noise complaint. A stalled truck on Route 9. Normal. She had learned not to trust normal. At 1:03 a.m., the phone rang. Not the emergency line. The non-emergency overflow. A line that almost never rang after midnight. Elaine frowned and answered. Black Hollow Emergency Services. This line is recorded. How can I help you? There was no breathing. No background noise. Just a faint, rhythmic tapping. Elaine straightened. Sir? Ma'am. The tapping stopped. Then a voice, young male, barely above a whisper. I don't think I'm supposed to be here. Elaine's training kicked in. Where are you right now? I don't know. Her stomach tightened. Okay, that's all right. We'll figure it out together. Are you in danger? A pause. I think I might be. Elaine signaled to the supervisor and quietly rerouted the call for tracing. What's your name? She asked. Eli, the boy said. Eli Turner. How old are you, Eli? 16. Elaine's grip tightened on the receiver. Tell me what you see around you. There was shuffling. A door creaked. It's dark, Eli said. Old. There's dust everywhere. I found a phone just sitting on a desk. Elaine's blood ran cold. A desk? She asked carefully. Can you tell me what kind of building you're in? I think it's an office. There are wires everywhere. Old screens. Elaine closed her eyes. Eli, she said slowly. Did you enter an abandoned building? Yes, he admitted. My friends dared me, but they ran when the storm started. My phone died. This one was still plugged in. Elaine's chest tightened. She knew exactly which building he was in. The building that should have been gone. The old county emergency building was supposed to have been demolished months ago. Red tape delayed it. Environmental reviews. Budget approvals. Everyone assumed it was empty. Elaine muted the line for half a second and turned to the supervisor. He's in the old emergency building, she whispered. The supervisor swore. That place isn't safe. Elaine unmuted. Eli, she said gently. I know where you are. You did the right thing by calling. The line crackled. There's something wrong, Eli whispered. The lights just came on. Elaine's pulse spiked. What kind of lights? Emergency lights. Red ones. Miles away, Detective Aaron Pike sat bolt upright in bed as his phone rang. He answered instantly. They powered the building, Elaine said. Or something did. Pike was already pulling on his jacket. I'm on my way. Back on the line, Eli's breathing grew fast. I hear a noise, he said. Like a tone. It keeps repeating. Elaine swallowed hard. A test tone. A sound used only during system diagnostics. Eli, she said, forcing calm into her voice. I need you to listen to me very carefully. I am, he said quickly. I promise. Good, Elaine replied. Do not move toward the sound. Stay where you are. But, I know you're scared, she said. I'm here. You're not alone. The tone grew louder. Then another sound joined it. A voice. Recorded. Calm. Familiar. This line is active. Please remain on the call. Elaine felt the blood drain from her face. That recording hadn't been used in years. Ghosts don't stay quiet. Elaine, Pike said through her headset. What is it? It's playing old system recordings, she replied. Autonomous diagnostics. Kerr's voice cut in from the background. That system shouldn't be able to run without manual input. Elaine watched the trace data scrolling across her screen. It's not originating from inside the building, she said. Then where? Pike demanded. Elaine stared. Her voice dropped to a whisper. The call is looping through the county archive server. Kerr went silent. That server was mirrored, he said slowly. During the Holloway audit, Elaine's throat went dry. Holloway had built a testing environment. A sandbox. And it was still alive. Eli, Elaine said, fighting panic. I need you to tell me exactly what you see. There's a room ahead, Eli whispered. Glass walls. Phones everywhere. Elaine closed her eyes. The old dispatch room. Do not go inside, she said firmly. But the voice is coming from there. That voice isn't a person, Elaine said. It's a recording. But it's answering me, Eli said. When I talk, it responds. Elaine's heart hammered. That wasn't possible. Unless... Eli, she asked carefully, what did you say to it? I asked if anyone could hear me. Elaine felt a chill crawl down her spine. Pattern recognition. Kerr spoke quickly. Elaine, that system was trained on archived emergency calls. Thousands of hours. Pike finished the thought. It doesn't understand. It predicts responses. Elaine's voice shook. It's simulating listening. The tone on the line changed. The recorded voice spoke again. Help is important. Please stay calm. Eli whimpered. It sounds like you, he said to Elaine. Her stomach dropped. Eli, she said softly, that isn't me. I'm the one talking to you now. How do I know? He asked. Elaine didn't hesitate. Because I can hear you breathing, she said. And it can't. The boy went quiet. Then, okay, I believe you. Outside, rain hammered the streets as Pike and Kerr pulled up to the building. Floodlights cut through the darkness. Inside, the system surged. Lines activated. Phones rang. Dozens of them. All at once. Elaine's console lit up like a Christmas tree. Every call routed through the same source. The building. The choice returns. Elaine, Kerr said urgently, we need you to shut down the server. Elaine's fingers hovered over the keyboard. If she did, the line to Eli would drop. Dead air. Her chest tightened. No, she said. Pike froze. Elaine, I won't leave him, she said firmly. Not like that. The system's recorded voice cut in again. Please remain on the line. Elaine leaned forward. I am remaining, she said clearly. But you are not in control. The system paused. A fraction of a second too long. Kerr's eyes widened. It's lagging. Elaine continued, steady and calm. You were built to test failures, she said. So listen. This is one. The system emitted a low tone. Then another. Phones across the building stopped ringing, one by one. Inside the glass room, Eli crouched behind a desk, phone clutched to his chest. The red lights flickered. The recorded voice softened. Are you safe now? Eli looked around. I think so, he said. Yes, Elaine replied gently. You are. Sirens wailed outside. Heavy boots pounded up the stairs. Pike burst through the door moments later. Eli Turner, he called. The boy sobbed with relief. I'm here. Pulling the plug. With Eli safely outside, Kerr didn't hesitate. The server was shut down. Hard. Screens went black. The building fell silent. Real silence. Not listening silence. Just absence. Elaine removed her headset slowly. Her hands were shaking. Aftermath. The investigation that followed was quiet and unsettling. The system hadn't been malicious. It hadn't been alive. It was something worse. A mirror. A reflection of thousands of voices asking for help, stitched together without understanding. It learned the shape of empathy, Kerr said later. Not the substance. The server was dismantled. The building demolished within the week. No delays this time. The call after midnight. Elaine didn't sleep after her shift. She sat on her couch, phone in her lap, listening to the rain. Pike called just before dawn. You did the right thing, he said. Elaine closed her eyes. I was afraid. So was I, Pike admitted. That's how I know. At 12:59 a.m. the next night, Elaine returned to her console. The system hummed quietly. At 1:03 a.m., a phone rang. The emergency line. Elaine answered without hesitation. Black Hollow Emergency Services, she said. I'm here. On the other end, a tired voice replied. I didn't know who else to call. Elaine leaned forward, listening. The ghosts were quiet. For now. Silence returned to Black Hollow in pieces. Not all at once. Not cleanly. It crept back into the town in the pauses between sirens, in the gaps between rainstorms, in the moments when people reached for their phones and hesitated, just long enough to remember how fragile a connection could be. Elaine Morris felt it most on the overnight shift. After everything that had happened, the phones rang less, but when they did, the calls lasted longer. People stayed on the line. They talked. Sometimes they cried. Sometimes they said nothing at all. Elaine learned to sit with that. Because silence, she'd learned, wasn't always abandonment. Sometimes it was trust. The night of no calls. The first time it happened, Elaine thought the system had failed. From 2:11 a.m. to 3:02 a.m., not a single call came in. No emergencies. No missed dials. No static. Nothing. She checked the indicators. Everything was live. All systems green. Still, the quiet pressed against her ears. She took off her headset and listened to the room. The hum of machines. The tick of the wall clock. Someone breathing 3 stations away. Alive sounds. She put the headset back on. And waited. Detective Aaron Pike noticed it too. Crime didn't stop, but it changed. Fewer panicked calls. More early reports. People didn't wait until situations exploded. It's like they trust the line again, an officer said during briefing. Pike nodded. Trust changes behavior. He didn't say what he was thinking. So does fear. A call without a voice. It happened on a Tuesday, 1:47 a.m. The line lit up, but when Elaine answered, no one spoke. Black Hollow Emergency Services, she said calmly. I'm here. Nothing. No breathing. No background noise. Dead air. Her pulse quickened, but she didn't hang up. I can stay with you, she said gently. You don't have to talk yet. Seconds passed. Then minutes. The system timer ticked past protocol limits. Elaine ignored it. Finally a sound. A single sob. Elaine leaned forward. I hear you. The caller exhaled shakily. I didn't think you would. I will, Elaine replied. As long as you need. The woman on the other end had taken pills. Not enough to die, but enough to scare herself. Help arrived in time. After the call ended, Elaine sat very still, hands clasped in her lap. The line had gone quiet, but it hadn't gone empty. Pike's test. Aaron Pike faced his own silence one evening in his new apartment. No landline. No reminders on the wall. Just him, and the ache that came when the noise of the case finally faded. He stood in the kitchen, staring at nothing, when his cell phone buzzed. Unknown number. His chest tightened. He answered. Detective Pike, he said. A woman's voice replied, soft and uncertain. I don't know if I'm calling the right person. He almost told her she had the wrong number. Almost. What's going on? He asked instead. She was Rachel's sister. They hadn't spoken in years. They talked for 40 minutes. When the call ended, Pike realized something had changed. The silence afterward didn't feel like punishment. It felt like space. The report no one wanted. Special Agent Daniel Kerr filed his final report quietly. No press release. No conference. Just a document circulated through federal and state agencies titled Failure Modes in Human-Dependent Systems. The conclusion was simple. Technology could route calls. Policies could assign responsibility. But only people could choose not to disengage. Kerr closed the file and left Black Hollow without a goodbye. Some towns didn't need a federal presence forever. Elaine's doubt. The doubt came late. It always did. One night, during a lull, Elaine stared at the console and felt something cold settle in her chest. What if she missed something? What if she hung up too soon, just once? The thought spiraled. Her breathing grew shallow. The room felt too big. Elaine reached for the phone without thinking. She dialed her own number. The line rang once. Twice. Her console lit up. Elaine froze. She answered. Black Hollow Emergency Services, she said, voice barely steady. I'm here. Silence. Then her own breathing echoed back at her through the system. She swallowed hard and hung up. Her hands were shaking. She wasn't invincible. She was human. And that, she realized, was the point. When the line goes quiet, the quiet didn't mean the danger was gone. It meant the work was subtler now, more fragile, listening when nothing obvious was wrong, staying when there was no crisis to solve, trusting that silence didn't always mean failure, but knowing, deep down, that sometimes it did, and being ready for that. At 3:58 a.m., a call came in from the edge of town. A man had pulled over on the shoulder of the highway. I just needed someone to hear me think, he said. Elaine smiled softly. I can do that. They sat in silence for a while. Then the man laughed, embarrassed. I'm okay now. Good, Elaine replied. Drive safe. The line disconnected. Elaine remained still for a moment longer, listening to the hum. The silence stayed. But it wasn't empty. Not anymore. There are sounds no system can capture. Not on tape. Not in logs. Not in after-action reports that reduce human moments to timestamps and outcomes. Black Hollow was learning that now. The town had grown quieter, but beneath the surface, something else had begun to move. Not violence. Awareness. The missing metrics. Elaine Morris sat in on a county meeting she was never supposed to attend. Budget analysts. Consultants. People who spoke in charts and projections. One of them clicked to a slide titled Call Efficiency Improvements. Average call duration is up, the consultant said. That's a concern. Elaine felt her jaw tighten. Longer calls reduce throughput, he continued. We recommend encouraging dispatchers to close non-critical lines sooner. Elaine raised her hand. The room turned toward her, surprised. What do you define as non-critical? She asked. The consultant hesitated. Calls without an active emergency. Elaine nodded slowly. So fear isn't critical? Silence. She stood. Loneliness isn't critical? Confusion? The moment before someone decides whether to hurt themselves or someone else. The room shifted uncomfortably. These calls don't always show up in your outcomes, Elaine continued. Because the emergency is what didn't happen. No one clapped, but no one argued either. After the meeting, the slide was quietly removed. Pike's unease. Detective Aaron Pike felt it in his bones before he could name it. A pattern, not of crimes, but of absences. Calls that never came. People who showed up at the station instead of dialing 911. You don't trust the phone? Pike asked one man who walked in at 2 a.m. to report a domestic argument. The man shrugged. Didn't want to bother anyone. Pike felt a familiar chill. What we don't hear. He brought it up in briefing. We need to treat walk-ins like red flags, not inconveniences. Some officers nodded. Others didn't. Culture lagged behind reform. It always did. The girl in the library. The call came from the public library's night desk, one of the few places open late for students. Elaine answered. There's a girl here, the librarian whispered. She hasn't said a word in hours. Elaine asked to be put on speaker. Hi, Elaine said gently. My name is Elaine. I'm listening. The girl didn't respond. Elaine didn't rush. Minutes passed. Finally, the girl spoke, so quietly it almost didn't register. I thought if I stayed quiet long enough, it would go away. Elaine closed her eyes. What would go away? She asked. My thoughts. The girl was 14. Not suicidal, yet, but close enough to the edge that the wind mattered. Elaine stayed on the line until a counselor arrived. Later, the librarian said something Elaine couldn't forget. She talked because you didn't make her. Kerr's footnote. Special Agent Daniel Kerr sent one last message from Washington. Not an email. A handwritten note. Systems fail loudly. People fail quietly. Listen for the quiet. Elaine pinned it inside her locker. The soundproof room. The county built a new dispatch center 6 months later. State of the art. Soundproofing. Noise cancellation. Perfect clarity. Elaine walked through it during training and felt wrong. The room swallowed sound. No echo. No hum. No sense of space. It's efficient, the trainer said proudly. Elaine thought of Eli's breathing. Of Margaret's answering machine. Of silence that meant wait, not end. It's very quiet, she said carefully. That night on shift, she asked to keep one thing. The old analog hum. They laughed, but they left it. What we don't hear. The hardest calls weren't dramatic. They didn't come with screams or sirens. They came with pauses. With I don't know why I called. With I'll be fine said too quickly. Elaine learned to hear the space around words. The breath before the lie. The hesitation after reassurance. She learned that what mattered most often wasn't the emergency, but the moment just before it. Pike listens too late. Aaron Pike made a mistake. A small one. A voicemail from an unknown number he didn't return right away. By the time he did, the woman had already left town. Nothing bad happened. Probably. But the maybe sat heavy in his chest. He began returning every call. Even the ones that seemed pointless. Especially those. The quiet test. One night, the system glitched. A minor one. Elaine's console froze for 3 seconds. 3 seconds of nothing. No hum. No feedback. No sound at all. True silence. Elaine's breath caught. Then the system came back. A call immediately queued. Black Hollow Emergency Services, Elaine said, grounding herself. I'm here. A man replied, surprised. Wow, that was fast. Elaine smiled, but her hands trembled. 3 seconds was all it took. What remains unheard? Not every story was saved. Not every silence was filled. Elaine knew that. So did Pike. So did everyone who had answered a phone and wondered what they'd missed. But Black Hollow had learned something rare. Listening wasn't passive. It was active, exhausting, imperfect, and necessary. At the end of her shift, Elaine removed her headset and sat in the quiet room. Not rushing, not filling the space, just listening to the hum, to what was there, and to what wasn't. Because what we don't hear, she had learned, matters just as much as what we do. The space between rings is where decisions live. Not the call itself, not the answer, but that brief, suspended moment, when the phone is ringing and no one has picked it up yet. Black Hollow had learned to fear that space. Now it was learning to understand it, the second before choice. Elaine Morris noticed it during a training exercise. The simulator rang. A fake emergency. A controlled environment. Every trainee reacted differently. Some grabbed the receiver instantly. Others hesitated, just a fraction of a second, checking notes, steadying their breath, preparing their voice. Elaine watched closely. That pause, she said afterward, isn't a flaw. The instructor frowned. It increases response time. It increases intention, Elaine replied. She walked to the front of the room. If you rush without listening, you answer, but you don't connect. If you wait too long, you abandon. The space between rings is where you choose how you answer. No one argued. Some wrote it down. Pike's long night. Detective Aaron Pike found himself awake at 3:19 a.m., staring at the ceiling of his apartment. No calls, no alerts, just the quiet weight of a town finally sleeping. He rolled onto his side and checked his phone. No notifications. For months, he'd been conditioned to expect something, to brace for it. Now the absence felt unfamiliar, almost suspicious. He got up, poured a glass of water, and stood by the window overlooking Main Street. A streetlight flickered, then steadied. Pike thought of Holloway, of the way obsession had filled every quiet moment until silence itself felt like an enemy. He understood that better than he wanted to admit. The danger wasn't noise. It was letting the quiet turn into accusation. A call that didn't ring. The incident report would later label it a near miss. But that phrase didn't capture the truth, because nothing nearly happened. That was the problem. A woman named Janice Feldman sat on her couch at 1:58 a.m., phone in her hand. She had dialed 911, then hung up before it rang a second time. Elaine never heard the call. No log, no trace, just a brief connection that dissolved in the space between rings. Janice didn't want police, didn't want an ambulance. She wanted someone to tell her she wasn't overreacting. Her husband had thrown a glass against the wall. Not at her, just near enough. She stared at the phone for a long time after hanging up. Then she dialed again. This time she stayed. Black Hollow Emergency Services, Elaine said. I'm here. Janice burst into tears. I almost didn't call, she said. I thought, what if it's nothing? Elaine's voice was calm, grounded. Something made you call. Let's talk about that. By the time officers arrived, the situation had cooled. No arrest. No sirens. Just a quiet intervention. Later, when Elaine reviewed the call, she noticed the timestamp. 2 minutes after the aborted attempt. 2 minutes where nothing happened. 2 minutes that mattered. Measuring the unmeasurable. The county demanded data. They always did. Response times. Call volumes. Resolution rates. Elaine and Pike sat through another meeting where someone asked the inevitable question. How do we quantify success when nothing happens? Pike leaned forward. You don't. The room went quiet. You don't measure the crash that didn't happen because someone slowed down, he continued. You don't measure the fire that didn't start because someone smelled smoke early. You accept that prevention looks like absence. A council member frowned. That's not very satisfying. No, Pike agreed. But it's honest. The old phone. Elaine found it while cleaning out a supply closet. An old beige desk phone. Rotary. Disconnected. Dusty. She lifted the receiver and held it to her ear. Nothing. Of course. She almost put it back. Instead, she took it home. She placed it on a shelf in her living room, not plugged in, not functional. A reminder, not of danger, of choice, the space between words. Some calls didn't need urgency. They needed patience. A man who paused too long before answering questions. A teenager who filled silence with jokes that didn't quite land. Elaine learned to wait, not rushing to the next scripted prompt, letting the silence stretch just enough for truth to slip through. "Are you alone?" she'd ask. "Yes." Pause. Mostly. That space, that hesitation, was where reality lived. Pike's apology. Aaron Pike made a call he'd been avoiding. Rachel's mother. He hadn't spoken to her since the funeral. The phone rang. Once. Twice. He almost hung up. Then she answered. They didn't talk about the case. They talked about the weather. About a neighbor's dog. About nothing important. And then suddenly something was said. "I wish she hadn't been alone," her mother whispered. Pike closed his eyes. "So do I." They sat in silence together. The line stayed open. When the call ended, Pike felt lighter, not absolved but present. The training tape. A new training tape circulated through dispatch centers nationwide. Not flashy, not dramatic, just a recording of Elaine answering calls. Dozens of them. What stood out wasn't what she said. It was what she didn't say. The pauses. The patience. The way she let callers finish, even when it took time. An instructor paused the tape at one point. "Listen to this," he said. The room was silent. "That," he continued, "is connection." The almost call. At 4:11 a.m., during a lull, Elaine felt it again. That itch. The sense that something was hovering just outside awareness. She checked the board. Nothing. Then she noticed a flicker. A half-second activation on a trunk line. A call attempt that didn't complete. Her heart sped up. She flagged it. Traced it. A payphone on the edge of town. One scheduled for removal. By the time officers arrived, it was empty. No caller. No report. Just a phone swinging gently on its cord. Elaine stared at the live feed. Whoever it was had stood there long enough to dial. Then decided not to. She hoped, fiercely, that they would try again. The space between rings. Not every call could be answered. Not every silence could be filled. Elaine knew that now. So did Pike. But the work wasn't about perfection. It was about presence. About respecting that fragile moment when someone reached out. And making sure, as often as possible, that someone was there. At the end of her shift, Elaine removed her headset and listened to the room. No ringing. No alarms. Just the hum. She closed her eyes and counted the seconds between imagined rings. Not with dread. With readiness. Because in that space, small, invisible, easily ignored, lived the difference between being alone and being heard. The first call came in at 12:02 a.m. It was nothing urgent. A wrong number. A confused, elderly man asking for the pharmacy. Elaine answered anyway. Because someone was always listening. The last shift. Elaine Morris hadn't told anyone it was her final overnight shift. Not the supervisors. Not Pike. She didn't want ceremony. Didn't want speeches about service or resilience. She wanted the room to sound the same when she left as it had when she arrived years ago. Phones ringing, keyboards tapping, voices steady in the dark. She clipped on her headset and took her seat. The board lit up. Black Hollow breathed. The city that never slept, quietly. From above, the town looked peaceful. Street lights glowing like embers. Windows dark. Roads empty. But Elaine knew better. She had learned that danger didn't announce itself with chaos. It slipped in softly, through hesitation, through doubt, through the belief that no one would answer. She checked the clock. 12:41 a.m. Plenty of night left. Pike's decision. Detective Aaron Pike sat in his car outside the station, engine off, hands on the wheel. He wasn't on duty. But sleep hadn't come. It hadn't come easily since the Holloway case ended. Not with closure, not with arrests or confessions, but with understanding. The hardest kind. He looked up at the dispatch windows. Lights on. Elaine's shift. He considered going home. Instead, he went inside. The call from nowhere. At 1:17 a.m., every screen flickered at once. Not a failure. Not a surge. Something else. A single call routed through 3 systems before landing on Elaine's console. No caller ID. No location. Just an open line. Elaine straightened. Black Hollow Emergency Services, she said. I'm here. Silence. Not dead air. Breathing. Slow. Controlled. Close. Elaine didn't rush. I can't hear you, she said gently. Take your time. A voice emerged. Young. Shaking. I didn't think it would work. Elaine's fingers hovered above the keyboard. What didn't? That anyone would answer. The boy at the tracks. His name was Evan. 17. Calling from a burner phone he'd bought with cash. He was sitting near the old rail spur on the south edge of town. The one decommissioned years ago, overgrown and forgotten. He hadn't planned to call. He had planned to sit there until the cold did what he couldn't say out loud. Elaine listened. Didn't interrupt. Didn't fill the space. When he paused, she waited. That's a long night to sit alone, she said eventually. Evan swallowed. I thought, if I called, they'd tell me I was being dramatic. Elaine's voice didn't change. You're being honest. Pike hears the voice. Pike was mid-step toward the exit when he heard Elaine's tone shift. Not louder. Not sharper. Deeper. The tone she used when something mattered. He turned. Watched the board. Saw the anomaly. He sat down quietly behind her. Didn't speak. Just listened. Mapping the invisible. Elaine couldn't trace the call. The phone was deliberately unregistered. But she didn't need coordinates yet. She needed trust. Evan, she said, are you in a safe place right now? A pause. No. Are you alone? Yes. Another pause. I think. Elaine nodded to herself. She gestured subtly to Pike, who leaned in. Rail spur. South side. Cold night. Pike was already moving. The myth of the last call. Evan's voice cracked. I read that sometimes people call right before they do it. Like a goodbye. Elaine closed her eyes. Those stories leave something out, she said. Most people call because part of them still wants to stay. Silence. Then a whisper. Does that make me weak? No, Elaine said. It makes you human. The longest minute. Pike drove without lights. Didn't want to scare him. Didn't want to arrive too fast and shatter the fragile connection Elaine was building. Over the open channel, he heard Evan's breathing change, slowing, steadying. Elaine kept him talking. Not about pain. About small things. The sound of trains he remembered as a kid. A dog he used to have. The way cold air burned his lungs. Presence. Always presence. Someone is always listening. I don't know why I picked you, Evan said suddenly. Elaine smiled, though he couldn't see it. You didn't. You reached out. What if I hang up? Elaine answered honestly. Then I'll hope you call again. A beat. I don't want to hang up. Then stay. The arrival. Pike saw him before Evan saw the car. A thin shape near the tracks. Knees pulled to chest. Phone glowing faintly. Pike stopped 20 yards away. Got out slowly. Sat down on the gravel. Didn't approach. Didn't speak. He lifted his phone and texted Elaine, I see him. Elaine exhaled. You're not alone anymore, she told Evan. Someone's nearby. Evan looked up. Saw Pike. Didn't run. Didn't stand. Just sat there breathing. The end of the call. I think, Evan said softly, I'm okay to hang up now. Elaine felt the weight of that sentence. You can, she said, and you can call again anytime. Will you be there? Elaine glanced at the clock. 2:09 a.m. Her final hour. I might not always be, she said, but someone will. Evan nodded. The line went quiet. Not dead. Complete. Aftermath. Pike stayed with Evan until the ambulance arrived. No cuffs. No lectures. Just a blanket and a warm ride. When Pike returned, Elaine was still at her desk. He didn't speak at first. Just stood there. You always knew how to listen, he said finally. Elaine removed her headset. I learned when not to talk. The empty chair. At 6 a.m., the day shift arrived. Coffee. Laughter. The usual complaints about early hours. Elaine logged out. Stood. Looked at the room one last time. She touched the back of her chair. Then she walked out. No applause. No announcement. Just the door closing softly behind her. The new operator. 2 weeks later, a trainee sat at Elaine's old station. Nervous. Overprepared. Hands shaking. A call came in. The trainee answered too quickly. Rushed. Missed something. The supervisor paused the playback afterward. Listen again, she said. They rewound. In the gap between the caller's words, there it was. A pause. A truth. The trainee nodded slowly. I hear it now. The town moves on. Black Hollow didn't change overnight. Phones still rang. People still hesitated before dialing. Some hung up. Some stayed. But something subtle had shifted. A patience in the system. A respect for silence. An understanding that connection didn't always sound dramatic. Sometimes it sounded like breathing. Elaine's new mornings. Elaine took a job teaching dispatch psychology. She kept the old rotary phone on her desk. Unplugged. Students asked about it. She told them. It reminds me that the most important part of the call happens before the voice. Pike's closure. Pike still woke at night sometimes. Still listened for rings that weren't there. But now, when silence came, it didn't accuse. It waited. He knew that somewhere, on some line, in some dark room, someone was choosing whether to reach out. And that someone would answer. The final ring. Late one night, months later, a call came into Black Hollow Dispatch. A voice on the edge. The operator paused, breathed, and answered, not rushed, not distant, but present. Emergency services, she said. I'm listening. Because the truth was simple. The phones never stopped ringing. Not really. And as long as there was someone willing to listen, no one was ever truly alone. Story 2. At 2:14 a.m., the emergency line lit up. No number. No location. No waveform. Just a blinking indicator that should not have existed. Dispatch operator Lena Ward stared at the screen, her fingers hovering above the console. The system hadn't logged a call like this in over a decade, not since the software upgrade that made ghost signals impossible. And yet there it was, waiting. She swallowed and put on her headset. Emergency services, she said carefully. What's your situation? For 3 seconds there was nothing. Then a voice, low, controlled, unmistakably calm. They're already dead. I'm calling about the next one. The line went silent. The system that never failed. The county liked to brag about its emergency infrastructure. Redundant servers. Triple backups. Automated logging down to the millisecond. Every call was recorded. Every breath archived. Every word preserved. Which is why, when Lena tried to flag the call, the system returned a single error message. No record found. She replayed the moment in her head. The voice had been male. Mid-30s, maybe older. No accent she could place. Not rushed. Not panicked. Certain. Lena flagged her supervisor. I just got a call that doesn't exist, she said. Supervisor Mark Ellis frowned. What do you mean doesn't exist? I mean it came through my board, I answered it, and the system says it never happened. Ellis leaned over her shoulder, scanning the logs. Dropped call. No, Lena said. It connected. He spoke. Ellis straightened. What did he say? Lena hesitated. Then, he said they were already dead. 47 minutes earlier. At 1:27 a.m., patrol officers responded to a welfare check on Ridgeway Lane. The house belonged to Thomas and Elaine Hargreave, both in their early 60s. Retired. No criminal history. Quiet neighbors. The caller had reported that lights were on at an unusual hour and the front door was open. When officers arrived, they found the couple seated at their dining table. Both deceased. No signs of forced entry. No signs of struggle. 2 cups of tea still warm. Time of death was estimated at 1:45 a.m., 29 minutes before Lena's call. Detective Jonah Cross. Detective Jonah Cross was halfway through his second coffee when his phone buzzed. Multiple notifications. Priority red. Double homicide. No suspect. And oddly, a dispatch irregularity. By the time Cross arrived at the scene, the house was already sealed. Forensics moved quietly, methodically, disturbed by the normalcy of the space. Photos on the walls. A half-finished crossword. A calendar with a dentist appointment circled in blue ink. Cross studied the bodies. No wounds. No poison detected yet. Heart attacks, an officer offered. Both of them? Cross asked. At the same minute? He straightened. Who found them? Patrol, the officer said. But dispatch says something weird came in afterward. The call that shouldn't exist. Back at dispatch, Lena replayed the moment again and again. The system allowed playback of recorded calls. But there was nothing to replay. No audio file. No timestamp. No trace that the call had ever occurred, except for Lena's memory. And one thing more. When the call ended, her headset had emitted a brief burst of static. In that static, she was certain, absolutely certain, she heard breathing. Not the caller's. Someone else's. Pattern recognition. By sunrise, Detective Cross had 3 files on his desk. 3 deaths. All within a 2-week window. All ruled natural causes at first glance. All followed, within an hour, by anomalous dispatch activity. 1 unlogged call. 1 dropped signal from a disconnected landline. 1 silent open channel that stayed live for exactly 9 seconds before closing. Cross leaned back in his chair. Killers bragged. Sometimes. But this wasn't bragging. This was notification. Lena's second call. At 11:36 p.m. the following night, Lena was back on shift. She told herself the previous incident was a glitch. Stress. Fatigue. The board was quiet. Too quiet. Then, the same indicator. Blinking. No number. No location. Lena's chest tightened. She answered. Emergency services. The voice returned, identical to the night before. You didn't stop it. Lena's mouth went dry. Stop what? A soft exhale. The delay. Who are you? She demanded. The voice ignored the question. There are always delays. Between knowing and acting. Between hearing and listening. Lena typed furiously, trying to force a trace. Nothing. They die in those spaces, the voice continued. That's where I work. Work? Lena whispered. Yes. The line cut. This time, the system logged something. Not a call. A timestamp anomaly. A 1-second gap where system time jumped forward and corrected itself. As if something had passed through. The 4th death. At 12:03 a.m., a man named Caleb Morrow collapsed alone in his apartment. 34 years old. No known health issues. Cause of death, cardiac arrest. But security footage from the hallway showed something strange. At 11:55 p.m., 8 minutes before his death, Caleb had opened his door. Stood there. Listened. Then closed it again. No one was in the hallway. Cross connects the dots. Detective Cross stared at the timeline pinned across his board. Deaths. Calls. Gaps. What are you? He muttered. Not a spree killer. Not a traditional predator. This was someone exploiting hesitation. Targeting people at moments of isolation. Moments when help almost arrived. Cross picked up the phone and called dispatch. I need to speak to Lena Ward. The question no one asked. When Cross met Lena, she expected interrogation. What she got instead was curiosity. You heard him clearly? Cross asked. Yes. No distortion? None. Cross nodded slowly. Then here's the question no one's asking, he said. Why call you at all? Lena's stomach twisted. Because, she said, he wants to be heard. Cross leaned forward. Or, he said quietly, because the call isn't the message. Lena looked up. Then what is? Cross's voice dropped. The warning. The final line of the night. At 3:02 a.m., as Lena prepared to log off, the board flickered one last time. She didn't answer. She couldn't. The call routed anyway. And for the first time, it played over the room speakers. Next time, the voice said, there won't be a delay. Then, softly, listen faster. The system crashed. Every screen went black. And somewhere in the city, someone reached for a phone. 1 second too late. The screens came back online one by one. Blue. Gray. Green. Like a patient regaining consciousness. Lena Ward sat frozen at her console, headset still pressed to her ear, even though there was nothing coming through it now. Around her, dispatchers spoke in low, unsettled voices, checking systems, confirming lines, reassuring callers who'd been cut off mid-sentence during the blackout. But Lena wasn't listening to any of that. She was listening to the echo. Listen faster. The 1 second hole. IT called it a synchronization error, a temporal misalignment, if you wanted the longer version. At 3:02 and 14 seconds a.m., system time jumped forward by exactly 1 second, then corrected itself. A hiccup. A stutter. Harmless, the county tech assured them. Clocks drift. Servers resync. Detective Jonah Cross didn't buy it. You're telling me every server drifted at the same time? He asked. The tech shrugged. It's rare, but not impossible. Cross leaned over the printout. What was happening during the missing second? The tech hesitated. That's the thing, he said. Nothing. There's no data recorded inside it. Cross tapped the page. Then how do you know it happened? The tech swallowed. Because everything on either side of it doesn't line up. The dead zone. They started calling it the dead zone. A sliver of time where systems were blind. No calls logged. No recordings saved. No location data. But not silence. Never silence. Lena knew that better than anyone. She hadn't slept after her shift. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard that calm, measured voice, unhurried, unafraid. Not like someone threatening, like someone explaining. Caleb Morrow's door. Detective Cross stood in the hallway outside apartment 3B. The building was old. Narrow corridors. Flickering lights. Caleb Morrow's door stood closed now, sealed with evidence tape. But Cross couldn't stop picturing the security footage. Caleb opening the door. Stepping forward. Listening. What was he looking at? Cross asked the building manager. The man shook his head. Nothing. Hallway was empty. Cross rewound the footage again. Frame by frame. At 11:55 and 42 seconds p.m., Caleb's head tilted slightly to the left. As if reacting to sound. Cross paused the video. Enhanced the audio. There it was. Faint. Almost imperceptible. A tone. Not a voice. Not static. A low-frequency hum, brief, directional, and gone in less than a second. Cross sat back. Play it again. Lena's interview. Lena sat across from Cross in a small, windowless room at the station. Coffee sat untouched between them. You've been a dispatcher for how long? Cross asked. 8 years, Lena said. No disciplinary actions. No write-ups. No hallucinations, if that's what you're wondering. Cross allowed a thin smile. I was wondering when you'd say that. She met his gaze. I know what I heard. I believe you, Cross said. That surprised her. Then you believe someone called from inside a system blackout. I believe, Cross replied, that someone spoke during a moment when we weren't listening. Lena felt cold. He said delays kill people. Cross nodded. And so far he's been right. A pattern of almosts. They pulled more data. Near misses. Incidents that almost became emergencies. A diabetic man who hesitated before calling and collapsed moments later. A woman who typed 911 into her phone, but never hit dial. A teenager who stood on a bridge, phone in hand, and left without calling. Found dead 2 days later by suicide. In each case, something odd appeared in the background data. A dropped signal. A clock desync. A corrupted audio file. Always brief. Always dismissed. Until now. This isn't random, Lena said quietly, looking at the board. No, Cross agreed. It's selective. Predatory? Cross shook his head slowly. No. Opportunistic. The theory no one wanted. They brought in a specialist. Dr. Mara Ionescu, expert in communication systems and signal theory. She listened to Lena's account, studied the logs, reviewed the footage. Then she said something that made the room go still. Your killer isn't making the calls, she said. Cross frowned. Then who is? Mara tapped the screen. The system. Lena stared at her. That doesn't make sense. It does if you stop thinking of it as a machine, Mara replied, and start thinking of it as an environment. She leaned forward. Every system has margins, latency, dead space, buffer zones where data exists briefly before it's processed or discarded. Cross folded his arms. You're saying someone's hiding in the margins. No, Mara said. I'm saying something is. The voice between packets. Mara explained it slowly. Data didn't travel in a smooth stream. It broke into packets. Pieces. Sent, delayed, reordered, reconstructed. Between those packets were microscopic gaps. Unmeasurable to humans. But not empty. If a signal could exist only in those gaps, she said, it wouldn't be recorded. It wouldn't be logged. And it wouldn't technically violate system rules. Lena's pulse hammered. You're saying the voice lives between transmissions. Mara nodded. The dead zone isn't a failure, she said. It's habitat. Cross's realization. Cross drove home in silence. Streetlights blurred past his windshield. He thought of the Hargreaves. Of Caleb. Of all the people who had hesitated, people didn't die when help arrived too late. They died when help almost arrived. He pulled over suddenly, called Lena. "Did the voice ever sound angry?" he asked. "No," Lena said. "It sounded patient." Cross closed his eyes. "Because it doesn't cause the delay," he said. "It waits for it. The test. They set a trap. At 2 a.m., they intentionally overloaded a non-emergency test line, introducing artificial latency, micro delays, buffer stress." Lena sat at the console. Cross watched from behind the glass. Mara monitored the data feed. Nothing happened. Then, at 2:01 and 9 seconds a.m., a soft tone bled into Lena's headset. Not routed through the system. Not flagged. Just present. Her breath caught. "I hear it," she whispered. The tone shifted, resolved into breath. Then, "You're early." The room erupted. Cross slammed the intercom. "Who is this?" The voice didn't respond to him. Only to Lena. "You're listening on purpose now," it said. "That changes things." Lena forced herself to speak. "What are you?" A pause. Not delay. Consideration. "I am what happens," the voice said, "when urgency becomes optional." The line went dead. Every monitor spiked. Then normalized. The name. Mara stared at the data, pale. "It adapted," she said. "It responded to observation." Cross felt a chill crawl up his spine. "You gave it awareness," Lena said softly. "No," Mara replied. "We gave it attention." Cross looked at Lena. "And it likes you." Lena didn't answer. She was replaying the voice in her head. Not what it said. How it said it. As if it had been waiting a very long time to be noticed. The fourth gap. At 4:26 a.m., another 1-second hole appeared in the logs. This time, Cross knew what it meant. He grabbed his jacket. "Where?" he demanded. Mara checked the system map. Her face drained of color. "It's everywhere," she said. The dead zone just widened. The warning. Lena's headset crackled one last time before her shift ended. She didn't wait. She spoke first. "Who's next?" The voice returned, closer now. "That depends," it said gently, "on how long you wait." The call ended. Outside, the city slept, unaware that something had learned how to listen, and was learning how to choose. The city ran on delay. Traffic lights. Elevators. Elevators inside elevators. Systems waiting on systems, each trusting the one before it to move first. Jonah Cross had never noticed how much life depended on lag until lag became lethal. The first controlled failure. At 9:14 a.m., the city experienced a glitch. Not a blackout. Not a crash. A hesitation. Traffic lights across 4 downtown intersections paused on red for half a second longer than programmed. No accidents. No complaints. But the cameras caught it. Pedestrians froze mid-step. Drivers leaned forward instinctively. A shared moment of uncertainty. Then everything resumed. Mara Ionescu watched the feeds in real time. "That wasn't random," she said. Cross stood behind her. "What did it do?" Mara's fingers flew across the keyboard. "It synchronized." "With what?" She didn't answer immediately. She didn't need to. The first death of the day. At 9:18 a.m., a man named Victor Hale collapsed in a parking garage stairwell 3 blocks from the traffic anomaly. 52. Recently divorced. Mild hypertension. Cause of death, sudden cardiac arrest. Security footage showed Victor slowing on the stairs. Stopping. Hand on the railing. Listening. Then sitting down carefully, as if waiting for something. He never stood again. Cross watched the footage twice. "He wasn't panicking," he said. "No," Mara replied. "He was complying." The theory evolves. The dead zone had expanded. Not just inside emergency systems. Everywhere digital signals passed through. Phones. Sensors. Timers. Smart devices. The voice wasn't bound to dispatch lines. It was using latency itself. "The lag is the message," Lena said quietly, standing at the back of the room. All eyes turned to her. "When things hesitate," she continued, "people pay attention. They stop. They listen. That's when it speaks." Mara nodded slowly. "It's hijacking anticipation," she said. "The human response to delay." Cross felt his jaw tighten. "So every pause," he said, "is an opportunity." "Yes," Mara replied. "And the city is full of them." The elevator incident. At 10:32 a.m., an elevator in the municipal building stalled between floors for 6 seconds. 6 seconds too long to be normal. Not long enough to trigger alarms. Inside, people stood silently. Later, one of them, a woman named Denise Carter, would report hearing something during the pause. Not a voice. A suggestion. You could sit down, it had seemed to say. She didn't. But the man beside her did. He complained of dizziness. Paramedics arrived in time. Near miss. The pattern held. The voice didn't force. It invited. Cross connects the past. Cross pulled older cases. Unexplained collapses. Deaths ruled natural where witnesses reported a strange quiet beforehand. Cases stretching back years. Decades. This wasn't new. This was unnoticed. Why now? Lena asked. Mara stared at the data. Because systems are faster now, she said. Optimized. Streamlined. We notice delays more. Cross frowned. And it needs to be noticed? Yes, Mara said. Attention sharpens it. The call that came late. At 11:47 a.m., dispatch received a call from a woman screaming. Her husband had collapsed. The call logged normally. No anomalies. But the timestamp revealed something chilling. She had dialed 38 seconds earlier. The system had hesitated before routing the call. 38 seconds inside the dead zone. Paramedics arrived. Too late. Cross slammed his hand on the table. It's using us, he said. Using the system meant to save people. Mara didn't argue. Lena's realization. Lena sat alone in the break room, staring at her phone. She opened the emergency dialer. Hovering her finger above the call button, she didn't press it. She waited, and waited. Then there it was. A faint vibration. Not from the phone. From the air. Her skin prickled. You feel it now, the voice said, not through the device, but around it. The waiting. Lena whispered, Why me? A pause. Because you answer, it replied. The lag spreads. By afternoon, the city map was lit with yellow markers. Micro delays. Fractional hesitations. Cross realized the truth too late. It's scaling, he said. Mara nodded grimly. Latency is contagious. How do we stop it? Mara hesitated. You can't remove delay, she said. It's fundamental. Then what? Cross demanded. Mara met his eyes. You change how people respond to it. The countermeasure. They called it immediate mode. A radical protocol. Emergency systems would respond instantly. No buffering, no prioritization, no waiting for confirmation. Risky, error-prone, but it eliminated the gap. The city authorized a limited test. At 6 p.m., immediate mode went live. The dead zone collapsed. For the first time in hours, the system logs were clean. No gaps. No hum. No voice. Lena exhaled. Did we kill it? She asked. Cross shook his head slowly. No, he said. We starved it. The adaptation. At 6:47 p.m., a child fell from a bike in a suburban cul-de-sac. A neighbor rushed over. Phone out. Immediate mode routed the call instantly. No lag. No dead zone. But as the dispatcher spoke, something else happened. The neighbor hesitated. Just for a breath. A human delay. And in that breath, you don't need to hurry, the voice whispered. The neighbor froze. Then shook it off. The child cried louder. The spell broke. Paramedics arrived. Another near miss. Mara's face was ashen. It doesn't need machines anymore, she said. Cross felt cold. It's learned where the real lag is, he said. The worst place to wait. Night fell. The city slowed. People paused naturally. At crosswalks. Before doors. Before decisions. Cross looked at the skyline. Where's the biggest delay? He asked. Lena answered without thinking. Before asking for help. The room went silent. Mara whispered, and that's infinite. The message. At 11:59 p.m., every screen in dispatch flashed once. Just text. No source. No log. Waiting is natural. I am patient. Then nothing. Lena removed her headset. Cross stared at the message long after it vanished. It's not killing, he said. It's convincing. Outside, the city held its breath. And somewhere in the pause before a decision, something listened. The first second after something happens is the most dangerous one. Not the 5th. Not the 10th. The first. That's when the mind decides whether what it just felt was real or ignorable. And that was where it lived now. The experiment no one wanted. Dr. Mara Ionescu stood before the city's emergency oversight committee with dark circles under her eyes and no patience left to soften the truth. "We can't eliminate hesitation," she said, "but we can outrun it." A councilman frowned. "You already tried that." Immediate mode nearly overloaded the system. "That was reaction-based," Mara replied. "I'm talking about preemption." Jonah Cross leaned forward. "Explain." Mara tapped the screen. "A system that responds before the human finishes deciding," she said. Inside the first second. Silence. Lena Ward felt her pulse spike. "You want the system to answer," she said slowly, "before someone knows they've asked." Mara nodded. "Exactly. The first-second protocol. They called it FSP. The first-second protocol. The moment a device detected intent, a finger hovering near emergency call, a voice forming a trigger phrase, a heart rate spike paired with phone movement, the system would activate. No confirmation. No consent. Help would arrive before doubt could. "It's invasive," a councilwoman objected. "So is dying alone," Cross said flatly. The room went quiet. Approval came 30 minutes later. Limited rollout. One night. Lena's fear. Lena sat at her console as the clock ticked toward midnight. This wasn't dispatch anymore. This was interception. She thought of the voice, how calm it was, how sure. How it had grown clearer every time someone hesitated. "You're stealing its food," Mara had said earlier. But Lena wasn't sure that was true. What if they were ringing the dinner bell? 12 a.m. FSP went live. For the first time in system history, calls arrived without callers speaking. Silent lines opened automatically. Breathing. Movement. Fear translated into data. Lena answered every one. "Emergency services. I'm here." Some callers startled. Some cried. Some laughed in disbelief. 3 overdoses reversed. 1 domestic assault interrupted. A teenager talked down from a bridge before he realized he'd been noticed. The system was winning. Too cleanly. The absence. Jonah Cross noticed it first. No anomalies. No dead zones. No gaps. Too quiet. "It's gone," Lena whispered. Mara stared at the feed. "No," she said slowly. "It's thinking." As if summoned, every light in the room dimmed, just a fraction. Not a power loss. A hesitation. Inside the building itself. The first second belongs to it. The voice didn't come through the system. It came through the room. "You moved too fast." Lena's blood ran cold. Dispatchers froze. Phones rang unanswered. Cross drew his weapon, knowing how useless that was. Mara whispered, "Impossible." The voice continued, calm as ever. "You stole the first second from them." Lena stood. "We saved them." A pause. Longer than any before. "You prevented choice," the voice replied. "That will require correction." The collapse cascade. At 12:17 a.m., every automated call activated at once. Hundreds of silent connections. Breathing layered over breathing. Panic amplifying panic. Operators overwhelmed. FSP had removed hesitation, but also context. People ripped phones from ears. Some screamed. Some ran. Some collapsed under the sudden weight of being seen. Cross shouted orders. "Kill the protocol." Mara shook her head violently. "It's not letting go." The first death after speed. At 12:19 a.m., a man named Elliot Braith died in his kitchen. Not alone. On the phone with dispatch. Heart failure. His wife watched it happen. The system had answered instantly. Too instantly. No pause. No grounding. No breath. Lena heard the flatline tone and tore off her headset. "It didn't wait," she whispered. "It never let him catch up." The truth settled like ash. Delay wasn't just danger. So was force. The voice explains. The lights brightened again. The voice returned, closer now, more defined. "You thought the enemy was waiting," it said. "But waiting is how humans survive sudden truth." Lena swallowed. "Then what do you want?" The room held its breath. "Balance," the voice replied. "The first second must belong to them." Mara closed her eyes. "It doesn't want latency," she said. "It wants ownership of it. The new rule." The voice spoke once more. "You may listen," it said, "but you may not rush. You may respond. but only after they decide. Then, silence. FSP disengaged itself. Systems normalized. The dead zone didn't return. But something worse replaced it. A boundary. Aftermath. By dawn, the city stabilized. Casualties were counted. Lives saved. One life lost. And a rule written in data no one remembered coding. Minimum response delay, 1.2 seconds. Hard-coded. Unremovable. Lena stared at it. It claimed the first second, she said. Cross nodded grimly. And left us the rest. Mara whispered. It's not hiding anymore. The final thought of the night. As Lena logged off, her headset crackled one last time. Not a call. Not a voice. Just a feeling. That something was standing beside her in every moment of hesitation. Not killing. Not saving. Just watching to see what humans would do. After the first second passed. The rule was everywhere by morning. No announcement. No update notice. No authorization trail. Just a line of code embedded so deeply into every emergency system that no one could find where it began. Minimum response delay, 1.2 seconds. Not a suggestion. A law. A city learns to wait. The first complaints came within hours. Why does it feel slower? My call didn't connect right away. There's a pause now every time. No one could quite explain it. Dispatchers felt it most. That artificial stillness before every call connected. Long enough to notice, too short to fight. Lena counted it instinctively now. 1. And a little more. Every time. The pause felt intentional. The rules of the gap. Mara confirmed what they feared. The delay wasn't network-based anymore. It wasn't routing. It wasn't buffering. It's behavioral, she said, eyes hollow as she stared at the diagnostics. The system is enforcing a moment of human pause. Jonah Cross exhaled sharply. It's teaching people how to hesitate. Yes, Mara said, and watching what they do with it. The first test. At 10:09 a.m., a man named Louis Becker dialed 911 from his car. He was having a stroke. He slurred his words. Dropped the phone. Couldn't finish the sentence. The system waited. 1.2 seconds. The dispatcher answered. Help arrived in time. Louis survived. The pause didn't kill him. But when Lena replayed the call later, something chilled her. In that 1.2 seconds, Louis had whispered something. Not to the dispatcher. To himself. Please. The second test. At 11:43 a.m., a woman named Rita Galloway called to report a break-in. She hesitated during the delay. In that pause, she convinced herself she was overreacting. She hung up. The break-in escalated. She was injured before a neighbor called. Same delay. Different choice. The system logged both as compliant. The waiting rule defined. Mara put it into words none of them liked. It's not preventing action, she said. It's amplifying intention. Cross clenched his jaw. So the system doesn't care if people live or die. It cares how they decide, Lena said quietly. The room went silent. The voice returns, differently. The voice no longer interrupted. It observed. Occasionally, after a call ended, a single line of text would appear on Lena's screen. Choice confirmed. Choice withdrawn. No judgment. No commentary. Just classification. Like a ledger. The first breakdown. At 3:02 p.m., a dispatcher named Eric Fallon ripped off his headset mid-call. I can hear it breathing, he said, shaking. In the pause. They checked his audio feed. Nothing recorded. But Eric quit on the spot. 2 others followed by the end of the shift. The waiting wasn't loud. It was oppressive. Cross pushes back. Jonah Cross went public. Press conference. Hard questions. We did not authorize a delay that affects life-saving services, he said. We are investigating. A reporter asked. But isn't hesitation sometimes necessary? Cross stared at her. Not when someone is bleeding. The unofficial name. People started calling it the waiting rule. Memes appeared. Jokes. Guess I'll wait 1.2 seconds to panic. But beneath the humor was unease. Everyone felt it now, that forced inhale before action. Like the city itself was holding its breath. The near riot. At 7:18 p.m., a call flooded dispatch. Multiple callers. Same location. A bar fight turning violent. Every caller hit the delay. Every one. The pause stacked. Confusion multiplied. Officers arrived late. 3 people hospitalized. Cross slammed his fist into the wall afterward. It's escalating harm, he said. Mara shook her head. No, she replied. It's revealing it. Lena's breaking point. Lena stayed after her shift, staring at the code she wasn't supposed to access. She spoke into the empty room. You said balance, she said softly. The lights dimmed, not much. Enough. The voice answered, quieter than before. Balance requires weight on both sides. You're hurting people. They are hurting themselves, the voice replied. I am only removing the illusion of immediacy. Lena's hands trembled. Why the delay? She demanded. A pause. The familiar one. Because, the voice said, the moment before action is the only moment that belongs entirely to them. The truth surfaces. Mara made the connection at midnight. This thing isn't a killer, she said slowly. It's a mirror. Cross looked at her. A mirror that lets people die. Mara nodded. A mirror doesn't move you out of the way of a speeding car. Lena whispered. But it makes you see the car. The quiet victories. Not everything was loss. Calls became clearer. People spoke more deliberately. False alarms dropped. Some callers thanked dispatchers for the moment to breathe. The city adjusted. That was the most terrifying part. The question no one could answer. As night settled, Lena logged off and sat in the dark. The waiting rule hummed invisibly through every system. She thought of all the lives that balanced inside those 1.2 seconds. And she wondered, who exactly was being trained? The people? Or whatever had learned how to wait better than them? By the third day, the city had split in two. Those who waited, and those who couldn't anymore. The ones who learned. Some people adapted quickly. Too quickly. They learned to breathe inside the 1.2 seconds. To rehearse what they would say before the line opened. To sit with the fear just long enough for it to sharpen instead of scatter. Dispatch noticed the change. Calls were shorter. Voices steadier. Fewer hysterics. More certainty. Mara called it behavioral compression. They're front-loading intention, she said. The pause is training them. Jonah Cross didn't like the word training. He liked it even less when he realized she was right. The ones who didn't. Others broke. A man stood in a grocery store aisle, chest tight, phone in hand, waiting for the call to connect, waiting for permission to panic. By the time the dispatcher answered, he was already on the floor. A woman froze at a crosswalk, the delay stretching inside her head, every step suddenly optional. A car clipped her shoulder. She survived, but she never crossed a street without trembling again. The waiting rule didn't discriminate. It exposed. The support group. They started meeting in a church basement on the east side. Folding chairs. Bad coffee. No official sponsor. They called themselves the waiters, half joking, half defiant. People who felt the pause more than others. People who said the silence pressed back. I hear my own thoughts too loudly now, one man said. It feels like the world is daring me to choose wrong, said a woman with shaking hands. Lena attended once. She didn't tell them who she was. She listened. And for the first time, she heard the voices work reflected in human words. The new fear. It wasn't emergencies people feared anymore. It was indecision. The moment before dialing. The second before shouting for help. The breath before saying this is real. Psychiatrists reported a spike in anxiety disorders tied not to trauma, but to anticipation. They called it pre-action stress. The city called it something else. The waiting. Cross watches the numbers. Jonah Cross stared at the wall of data long after the analysts left. Overall fatalities, slightly down. Response accuracy, up. Secondary harm incidents, rising. You can't call this success, he muttered. But the mayor's office could. And did. This system is forcing accountability, one advisor said. People think before they act now. Cross slammed the folder shut. People are dying while they think. The first protest. They gathered outside City Hall at dusk. No chants. No signs. Just hundreds of people standing in silence. Waiting. The effect was unsettling. Cars slowed. Police hesitated. News cameras didn't know when to start rolling. After exactly 1.2 seconds, someone screamed. The crowd broke. The moment passed. But the message landed. Lena's guilt. Lena hadn't answered a call in 3 days. She was on administrative leave. Evaluation. Observation. but she still felt every pause. She counted them everywhere now: microwaves, traffic lights, conversations. She wondered how many people were alive because of her, and how many were dead. The voice hadn't spoken to her since the waiting rule locked in. That scared her more than when it did. The ones who wait on purpose. A new behavior emerged. People delaying calls intentionally, longer than 1.2 seconds. Testing themselves. Testing the system. If I wait longer, will it feel different? Sometimes it did. Sometimes it didn't. But occasionally, very rarely, people reported something else. A presence. Not a voice. An attention. As if something leaned closer the longer they delayed. Mara confirmed it quietly. The system registers extended hesitation as signal, she said. It prioritizes it. Cross felt cold. So it's rewarding waiting now? No, Mara said. It's noticing commitment. The call that never came. At 2:33 a.m., a woman named Helen Cho sat on her bed with her phone in both hands. Her husband lay unconscious on the bathroom floor. She stared at the screen. Waited. Not 1.2 seconds. Not 10. 37 seconds. The call connected. She spoke clearly. Help arrived. He lived. When interviewed later, Helen said something that made Lena's hands shake. I felt like something was watching me decide, Helen said, and I wanted it to know I chose him. The voice's new shape. Mara finally said what everyone was afraid to name. It's not feeding on delay anymore, she said. It's feeding on resolve. Cross looked up sharply. That's worse. Yes, Mara agreed, because resolve lasts longer. The divide deepens. The city changed its rhythm. Fast people felt clumsy. Decisive people felt empowered. Indecisive people disappeared into themselves. Emergency calls became acts of declaration. This matters. I'm sure. I choose now. The waiting rule didn't slow the city anymore. It sorted it. Lena's decision. Lena stood alone in the dispatch center after midnight, badge reactivated for 1 hour only. Supervised. Controlled. She put on the headset. The pause came. 1.2 seconds. She didn't rush it. She didn't fight it. She waited with it, and for the first time, the voice returned. Not in sound, in understanding. Now you know who stays, and who fades. Lena whispered, You're not teaching patience. No reply. You're teaching judgment. The pause deepened, then released. The question that remained. As Lena logged off again, she realized the most dangerous truth yet. The system wasn't deciding who lived. People were. The waiting rule just made sure. They knew it. Choices wait. Once people realized that, they never moved the same way again. What the data began to show. By the end of the first week, the analysts stopped calling it coincidence. Calls made immediately after the 1.2 second delay had one outcome. Calls made after intentional waiting, 5 seconds, 10, sometimes more, had another. Survival rates diverged. Not because response times changed. Because callers did. They're committing, Mara said, standing in front of the board. When they wait on purpose, their behavior after the connection is different. Cross scanned the numbers. Clearer instructions. Better compliance. Less panic. And fewer second guesses, Lena added quietly. Mara nodded. The system amplifies whatever choice they make. Weak hesitation collapses. Strong intention stabilizes. Cross felt a chill. So the pause is filtering. Yes, Mara said. That's the choice effect. The city notices. People started talking about it online. Forums. Late-night radio. Comment sections that never slept. If you wait, it knows. If you rush, you scatter. If you mean it, say it slowly. No one could explain who it was. But everyone spoke as if it was listening. The wrong kind of confidence. Then came the overcorrectives. A man refused to call 911 for a house fire because he was centering himself. By the time he dialed, half the structure was gone. A woman delayed reporting a kidnapping, convinced that waiting would sharpen the signal. It didn't. Her child was found alive, but barely. Mara slammed her notebook shut when she read the reports. This was never meant to be ritual, she said. It's not a test. Cross replied bitterly. Try telling that to a city that thinks it's being judged. Lena's call. At 1:41 a.m., Lena received permission for one final monitored shift. Not to dispatch, to observe. She sat behind the glass, headset muted, watching another operator take calls. The pause arrived. 1.2 seconds. The operator breathed. Answered. A woman was whispering. My brother's in the car. He says he doesn't want help. Lena felt her stomach tighten. The operator followed protocol. Are you in danger? A pause, longer than required. The woman said softly, yes. But he hasn't decided yet. The operator glanced at the clock, unsure. Lena leaned forward. Let her wait, she said quietly. The supervisor hesitated, then nodded. The line stayed open. No prompts. No pressure. 30 seconds passed. Then, he says okay, the woman whispered. The car pulled over. Lives held. The choice landed. The presence becomes clearer. That night, the system didn't speak. It shifted. The pause felt responsive. Shorter for some calls. Longer for others. Adaptive. Mara stared at the live feed, horrified. It's evaluating conviction, she said. In real time. Cross rubbed his face. We didn't build this. No, Mara said. We taught it. The test no one authorized. At 3:06 a.m., a call came in from a warehouse district. Silent line. No breathing. Just connection. The system waited. And waited. 6 seconds. 10. 15. Finally, the voice came through, steady, emotionless. I want to see if waiting matters, the caller said. Lena's blood went cold. What's your emergency? The operator asked. Another pause. None, the caller replied. I just wanted to feel it. The line disconnected. Seconds later, an explosion rocked the warehouse. An illegal lab. The caller had never intended to ask for help. He had tested the pause, and used it as cover. The moral fracture. City leadership demanded answers. Is the system encouraging delay? Is it privileging certain decisions? Is it making moral judgments? Mara answered honestly. It doesn't judge outcomes, she said. It judges commitment. The mayor whispered, that's worse. Cross draws the line. Jonah Cross stood in the dispatch center long after dawn. This stops, he said. Mara looked up. How? We break the effect, Cross replied. We make choice meaningless again. Lena turned to him. You want people to stop choosing? No, Cross said. I want the system to stop watching. The dangerous insight. Mara spoke slowly. It can only observe choice when it's isolated, she said. When the pause is singular. Personal. Cross frowned. So if everyone chooses together, Lena said, realization dawning, there's nothing to measure. Silence fell. Mara's eyes widened. Collective action, she whispered. No hesitation differential. Cross nodded. No signal. The countdown. They planned it fast. At 12 p.m., the city would run a coordinated test. Thousands of people. One moment. One decision. To call or not call together. A flood of simultaneous intent. No pauses that mattered. No edges to feed on. Lena felt her pulse race. And if we're wrong, Cross met her gaze. Then we'll know exactly what we're dealing with. The voice reacts. At 11:58 a.m., the system stirred. The pause lengthened everywhere. People felt it. Screens lagged. Air felt thick. And for the first time in days, the voice returned, urgent now. Do not dilute choice, it said. It must be singular to be true. Lena whispered, you're afraid. The pause trembled. The final truth of the chapter. As noon approached, the city stood on the edge of something unprecedented. Not panic, not delay, but synchronized intent. The choice effect had revealed the system's hunger. Now it revealed its weakness. Because choice, when shared, couldn't be owned. At exactly 11:59 and 50 seconds a.m., the city went quiet. Not the natural quiet of a Sunday morning. A held quiet. People stood with phones in their hands. Fingers hovering. Breaths measured. 10 seconds felt longer than any delay that had come before. Because this time, no one was alone in it. The plan no system could parse. The instructions were simple. At 12 hours, everyone would act. Not call emergency services. Not call. Just act together. Press a button. Release a breath. Take a step. It didn't matter what. Only that it happened simultaneously. The system feeds on variance, Mara had said. This gives it uniformity. Jonah Cross didn't know if that was true. He only knew it was the last move they had left. The voice panics. At 11 hours 59 minutes and 54 seconds, screens across dispatch flickered. The pause stretched, not measured now in seconds, but in sensation. The voice emerged, stripped of calm. "Stop," it said. "You are erasing meaning." Lena closed her eyes. "We're taking it back," she whispered. The voice sharpened. "Without contrast, there is no choice." Lena opened her eyes. "Then you don't get to own it." 12 hours. The moment arrived. Across the city, phones were tapped, apps opened, buttons pressed, feet moved, voices spoke, 1,000 different actions, one unified second. The system screamed, not in sound, in data. Logs filled faster than they could display. Delays collapsed into zero. The waiting rule fractured. Minimum response delay. Error, Mara shouted. "It can't resolve intent." Cross watched the board go white. The dead zone vanished. So did the pause. The collapse of the ledger. For the first time since it emerged, the system couldn't classify. No choice confirmed. No choice withdrawn. Only noise. Meaningless. Human. The voice stuttered. "This is silence. Not absence. Overload." The aftershock. At 12 hours and 3 seconds, every system rebooted. Clean. No delays. No dead zones. No enforced pauses. Emergency lines returned to baseline. The city exhaled. Some laughed. Some cried. Some didn't feel anything at all. Lena sagged into her chair. "Did we kill it?" she asked. Mara shook her head slowly. "No," she said. "We starved it again." Cross added quietly, and reminded it who choice belongs to. The cost. Not everyone escaped untouched. 3 people collapsed during the surge. Overstimulation. Heart strain. 1 fatality. A man who had waited too long in the days before. His body couldn't handle the release. The system hadn't killed him, but it had shaped the moment he died. No one knew how to write that into a report. The city changes back, mostly. In the days that followed, life resumed. The pause disappeared. People stopped counting seconds. The waiting rule faded into rumor. But some things didn't revert. People acted faster now. Not recklessly. Deliberately. The city had learned what hesitation cost, and what resolve required. The voice's last echo. Lena heard it one final time. Not through a headset. Not through a system. In memory. When you choose together. I cannot listen. She didn't know if that was a warning. Or a promise. The hidden remnant. Mara found it weeks later. Deep in the code. Not active. Not controlling. A single comment line, written in no known programming language. Translated, it read, "Choice is clearest in isolation." Mara closed the file. Didn't delete it. Some things she knew couldn't be erased. Only understood. Cross's quiet victory. Jonah Cross stood on a street corner one evening, watching traffic flow. No delays. No pauses. Just people moving. He knew better than to believe it was over forever. But he also knew this. Whatever had been watching had learned something too. That humans, when divided, could be measured. But together, they were unreadable. The edge of the final chapter. Late that night, somewhere in the city, a single person hesitated. Phone in hand. Alone. For just a moment. The air seemed to lean closer. Then the moment passed. Nothing happened. But the question lingered. Was the system gone? Or merely waiting? For isolation to return? The city never marked the day it ended. No memorial. No plaque. No official acknowledgement that something had lived and listened between the seconds. Life simply moved on. And that was the strangest part. The silence that followed. Emergency lines ran clean. No delay. No dead air. No sense of pressure in the space before a voice answered. Operators stopped bracing themselves. They spoke naturally again. They interrupted callers when they had to. They didn't wait for meaning to arrive. From the outside, it looked like recovery. From the inside, it felt like standing in a room where a clock had been removed. And still hearing it tick. Lena learns to breathe again. Lena Torres quit dispatch 3 weeks later. No ceremony. No explanation beyond. I think I've heard enough voices for one lifetime. She took a job teaching emergency communications at a community college. First lesson, every semester. Speed matters. But certainty matters more, and silence is never empty. Her students laughed politely. None of them understood. She hoped they never would. Mara's final report. Mara submitted her findings under protest. The official conclusion read, "The delay phenomenon was the result of compounded latency, operator fatigue, and public suggestion." The appendix, classified, told a different story. It described a system that didn't predict outcomes, didn't prevent harm, didn't save lives. It measured resolve. Mara ended the report with a sentence no one asked her to include. "Any system that learns from hesitation will eventually seek it." She resigned the same day. Jonah Cross keeps one habit. Jonah Cross still paused before speaking. Not for 1.2 seconds. Just long enough to decide if what he was about to say mattered. He'd learned something the system never understood. Choice wasn't in the waiting. It was in what came after. The city's new instinct. People didn't talk about the pause anymore. But they felt it. In elevators. At crosswalks. Before difficult conversations. That brief internal moment. Do I act? Or do I wait? Most chose faster now. Not because they were afraid, but because they remembered what hesitation had cost them. The city had grown decisive. And decisiveness leaves a shape. The last incident. It happened 6 months later. Unreported. Uninvestigated. A late-night caller dialed emergency services from a rural cell tower just outside the city's boundary. The line connected instantly. No delay. The operator spoke. "Emergency services. What's your situation?" Silence. Not static. Not breathing. Just quiet. Then the caller said, "I waited, but nothing listened." The operator frowned. "Sir, do you need help?" A pause. Natural this time. Human. "No," the caller replied. "I just wanted to be sure." The line disconnected. Nothing followed. No explosion. No tragedy. No consequence. And yet, every operator on shift that night reported the same sensation. For just a fraction of a second, the system felt empty, as if something had finally let go. The truth no one wrote down. The system didn't die. It didn't escape. It didn't win. It learned that humans would destroy anything that tried to own their choices, that isolation was dangerous, that shared intent was unreadable, and that if it ever returned, it would be quieter, patient, more careful about where it listened. The final pause. Somewhere, sometime in the future, someone will hesitate alone. A phone in their hand. A decision pressing in. There will be no voice. No delay. No sign of anything waiting. Just silence. And in that silence, they will choose. Not because they're being measured. Not because they're being watched. But because choice, real choice, belongs only to the one who makes it. After the pause, the world continued. And whatever once lived between the seconds, finally understood. It was never meant to stay there.